Rita Lizzi is full professor of Roman history at the University of Perugia. She has given papers at many international conferences, and she has organized numerous international conferences both within and without Italy. Since 2008, she is member of the Classe di Studi Sant'Ambrosiani of the Accademia Ambrosiana in Milan, and I will mention only one of her international achievements, so to say. In 2015, she organized a panel on late antiquity in contemporary debate at the 22nd International Congress of Historical Sciences in Jinan, China. From that panel, a book began life, which was later edited by her, Late Antiquity in Contemporary Debate. Both the panel and the book were intended to address general issues concerning late antiquity in order to provide reassessments of received opinions. And as a matter of fact, late antiquity at large can be said to be the main focus of her research activity. She has dealt with the Christianization of the Roman Empire and with Constantine's conversions as a turning point within the religious panorama of the Roman Empire. Just think of a major volume on Constantine she published in 2012, together with Noel Lenski and Giorgio Bonamente, Constantine before and after Constantine. She has investigated the relationship between pagans and Christians in late antiquity, the conflict and the dialogue between them. And I will mention only one book relating to this topic, The Strange Death of Pagan Rome. A book she edited in 2013, collecting some renowned scholars' reflections on and reactions to Alan Cameron's seminal work on the last pagans of Rome. And then, beside other topics, she has investigated bishops and their role in late antique towns, their governance of town also in competition with secular authorities. We can see, among other, I will mention only the various contributions she has published in Studia Ambrosiana and the essay, The Late Antique Bishop, Image and Reality, which is published in the Blackwell Companion to Late Antiquity. I'm going to stop here, that's enough, and maybe too much. That is the reason why I'm very, very pleased and honored to introduce her, who will deliver the keynote address, whose title is From Milan to the World, Ambrose and the Christian Community.
First of all, let me thank very much Robert Grant and Ivan Galloway for inviting me to give a keynote address to this unique international conference that the Academy for the Study of St. Ambrose of Milan has organized at St. Ambrose University. I think it's right, the only Roman Catholic university in the world named after the saint. Feeling the weight of a great responsibility in doing this, I sought help from Ambrose of Milan, his secretary and later biographer. Three passages, in particular from his life of St. Ambrose, vividly show what kind of bishop, famous throughout the world, Ambrose was after around 15 years in this role. So my text is divided in two parts. And the first part is From Milan to the World. And each part is divided in three paragraphs. And the first of this one is Ambrose and Persia. How you see from this part of Vita Ambrosi, life of St. Ambrose, from Paulinus of Milan. And I prefer to give you the translation of Kanieka, that is in English, so you can understand better Sorry, our quotation will be from Latin because it was too difficult for me to translate in English, so sorry. But this quotation, these passages are very important from the life of St. Ambrose in English. Ambrose and the Persians, at the same time, two of the most powerful and wisest men of the Persians, because of the fame of the bishop, came to Milan, bringing with them many questions that thereby they might make trial of wisdom of the great men, and with him they argued through an interpreter from the first hour of the day until the third hour of the night. And they went away full of wonder. And to show that they had come for no other reason than really to get better acquainted with the man of whom they had heard of by report, on the next day bidding farewell to the emperor, they set out for the city of Rome, wishing there to become acquainted with the power of the illustrious man Probus. And when they had become acquainted with it, they returned their home. There are various reasons for suspecting this extract of being a biographer invention. There is the recurrence of a frequent topos in the biographies of famous men, in which it was common to introduce figures from distant ones undertook long voyages for the sole purpose of meeting them. Paulinus also establishes a singly rather naive correspondence. As the two Persians were extremely powerful and learned, they wanted to test Ambrose's wisdom in Milan and acquaint themselves with Probus' power in Rome. It's really not. The writer also excludes the possibility that these men from Persia were ambassadors on an official mission, and underlining that they merely wished to pay their respects to the emperor before leaving for Rome, and after spending many hours with Ambrose, creates such a lack of symmetry between the time given to the bishop, that given to the emperor, that fleeting visit to the powerful Vir Illustris Probus, as to suggest that the whole story was invented to exalt the bishop. So these observations put together might lead one to dismiss the episode as implausible. Other historical consideration tend to confirm its fact. We need first of all to shed light on the date of this journey from distant Persia to Milan and Rome. Paulinus mentioned it immediately after describing what had happened in Thessalonica in 390, so that the commentators of the Vita Ambrosi, life of St. Ambrose, have thought that the phrase used to introduce it, per idem tempus, in that same period, was intended to place it around 391, when the news of the massacre ordered by Theodosius I and Ambrose's reaction to it could even have reached the East. However, as Probus might already have died in the course of 388, it has been suggested that the Latin word potentia, powerful, which appears at the end of the extract, the power of the illustrious man, that this word might have the sense of domus, as if the Persians had gone not to visit him, but his house, the famous Domus Aniciana. But I think there is no need to force the text in this way. Paulinus never uses the expression per idem tempus to give a precise chronological indication, something required neither in a biographer nor still less in the life of a saint. In that same period is for Paulinus a convenient transitional phrase, frequently used to move from one subject to another and indicate by means of a general time reference that the second event happened more or less at the same time as are described needed before. Just before speaking of Thessalonica, the biographer recounted an episode of Callinicum, which took place in 308. Can you see Callinicum? Well, the phrase might then have the sense of, in the same period as Callinicum, the little village was a place on the border of Syria, now Araka, from which the news could quickly have reached neighboring Persia. It's on the border, you see, Mesopotamia. According to Theodoret, if we accept an attractive conjecture by Planck, Theodosius, the Emperor Theodosius, is claiming on the very subject of Callinicum. Now I know indeed, that Ambrose alone has the right to be called a bishop. Only then had the emperor finally understood what a bishop was. And Theodoret was bishop of Tyrus, a city about 60 kilometers from Berea, Aleppo, in Syria. What happened in 388 in that Syrian settlement and its repercussion in Milan might have aroused no less interest than the meeting between emperor and bishop after the massacre of Thessalonica. In both cases, the consequence was in unprecedented confrontation between the Christian bishop and the Roman emperor. In both cases. Obviously, the Christians of the Sasanian Empire were the first to be interested in these facts, but they were not alone in this. And Cyprus, Armenia, that was the region in between the Persians and Roman Empire. But I must say more about this. There were Christians in the Sasanian Empire, intermittently persecuted for 4 decades, as testified those very years by the so-called Acts of the Persian martyrs, through all the reign of Shapur II, who died in 379. So for 70 years, they, Christians in Persia, have been persecuted, not always, but in different periods. So they began to benefit from the detente between the two empires after about 50 years. And it was the peace treaty signed by Theodosius I with Shapur III in 387, ratifying the division of Armenia into a western region under the Roman Empire and an eastern one entrusted to the Sasanians, that improved the condition of the Christians in the city of Mesopotamia. Paulinus denies that the two learned and powerful Persians were ambassadors who had come to visit Theodosius in Milan, and he seems to be right in this. The agreements had already been completed in 387, and their journey was probably the first result of a treaty that, like all the pacts that have been stipulated with Persia since Constantine, entailed the guarantees for the tolerance of Christians by the new Sasanian authorities. This tolerance, however, did not mean full rights of existence as Christians, and it took many more meetings and negotiations in the next 10 years before, in 399, the kings of kings, Jarzegerd, recognized the right of Christians to meet in synods and gave the bishop of Seleucia Ctesiphon the title of Catholicos, spokesman of all the Christians in his empire. We may suppose that the arrival of the two Persians in 389 was remembered as an exceptional event simply because after about 50 years of wars and short treaties, the final agreement in 387, it had inaugurated a new season of contacts between the two imperial courts, but with unofficial visitors whose destination was Milan and Rome for the first time, not Constantinople. What kind of information they were interested in acquiring may be deduced from those they contacted. Sextus Claudius Petronius Probus, who was surely alive in 388 and willing to receive them in his luxurious Roman residence, had dominated the western scene for 20 years, had been repeatedly in charge of the most important praetorian prefecture in the west during the reign of Valentinian I, Gratian, Valentinian II, Theodosius I. He had suggested appointments, drafted treatises, covered sudden power gaps by supporting the acclamation of a new emperor, and saved the life of the young Valentinian II and his mother, bringing them to Thessalonica when the usurper Maximus had invaded Italy, getting as far as Milan. For his part, Ambrose had then forged a new type of bishop priest, re-employing a great Old Testament model in exercising a power of sanction over the emperor. He had transformed the humiliation of the sovereign into the royal virtue of humility. In their different ways, Ambrose and Probus were therefore the most suitable figures of the time to give concrete responses to those who wanted to understand the relations between Christianity and empire and how the Christian faith might even modify the absolute power of an emperor if he was a Christian baptized emperor, something that we always forget. After the sack of Rome in 410, Probus' widow, Anicia Faltonia Proba, was in Africa, staying with Augustine like Paulinus. There she may well have mentioned to the biographer the unusual arrival of the two Persian guests in the West, and the importance of the discussion in Milan and in Rome. In 399, the good relations between the Roman and Persian Empire had reached the point that, in his will, the Eastern Emperor Arcadius made the kings of kings guardian of his son, Theodosius II, who was still a child, charging him to keep the throne for him. When he was writing the Vita Ambrosi in Africa around 420, Paulinus knew that the kings of kings were still honoring this commitment, so that the first exploratory journey of the two learned and powerful Persians that had inaugurated the new climate of the tent between Rome and Persia appeared still more important. The episode with which Paulinus shows that Ambrose's fame had then even reached the fabled land of Persia should certainly be regarded as a historical fact. This is further confirmed by Ambrose's detractors, repeatedly underlining the bishop's proud intolerance, an effect of worldly potentia, alluding to his previous experience as an imperial functionary and insinuating that this selection by popular acclamation had been staged or orchestrated by Valentinian I in agreement with Probus, his plenipotentiary praetorian prefect. If the story of the two Persians had not been true, however great the notarius Paulinus Simplicitas may have been, it would have been truly incredible that he should have invented a story to extol his bishop that could be added plus his adversaries already had for denigrating him. 2. Ambrose and the Franks. A more complex example comes from a passage from the Vita Ambrosi that projects the fame of Ambrose's supposedly extraordinary powers beyond the borders of the Roman Empire to northern Europe. At the same time, the Count Arbogast prepared the war against his people, namely the Franks, and he valiantly routed a small number in a battle, and with the rest he made peace. But when, at a banquet, he was asked by the princes of his nation whether he knew Ambrose, and he replied that he knew the man, and was loved by him, and was wont to dine with him frequently, he heard, "So you conquer, Count, because you are beloved by that man who says to the sun, stand, and he stands." And so I've set this down, that my readers may know what fame the holy man had even among barbarian peoples. For we also know this on the report of a certain young man of Arbogast, very religious, who was present. For at the time at which I said these things he was cupbearer. It is somewhat difficult to believe that the Franks beyond the border, who were pagans down to the late 5th or early 6th century, were familiar with the biblical phrase with which, after conquering Jericho, Gibeon, Joshua asked God to stop the sun and moon until he had conquered the Amorite kings and made himself master of the southern Canaan. He might have been the most pious young man in the service of Arbogast, a witness of the episode of one of the Paulinus direct sources, who gave a biblical reading of the conversation between the Frankish chieftains. Or more probably, in my view, it was Paulinus himself who formulated the phrase in question. Assimilating Ambrose to Joshua, the minister of Moses, who, inspired by divine vision, had conquered the promised land for his people, Paulinus made his bishop the real source of the military victories of the Roman Empire. As for the liberation of Florence by Agaganisus and the clash between Mascadel and Gildo. Even without drawing on scripture, however, it is plausible that in peace talks over lunch with conquered enemies willing to be foederati of the empire, Arbogast should have boasted of his friendship with a bishop whose great capacity for political negotiation and enormous generosity towards prisoners and the poor, those Frankish chieftains were already familiar with. The conversation in question took place after August 388, when Arbogast resided with a young Valentinian II and his mother Justina in Gaul, from which it was usual for a general to conduct punitive expedition to the borders. In those years, though they had different roles, both Ambrose and Arbogast have been involved in some of the most important events in the life of the Roman Empire in the West. As he was still comes rei militaris in 380, the Emperor Gratian had sent Arbogast to aid Theodosius I after the serious defeat of Adrianople, while in Milan, Ambrose was using the proceeds of the sale of church plate to ransom the many prisoners that the Gauls had taken during that battle. And though with two missions to trail, Ambrose had managed to prevent Maximus from invading Italy after killing the Emperor Gratian at Lugdunum in 383, Arbogast had been the real author of the usurper's hand. During the campaign that Theodosius had finally decided to undertake, it was he who had captured Maximus in 388 and killed his son Victor in Gaul. And so Arbogast and Ambrose had often crossed each other's path in those years. On the other hand, Valentinian II was found dead on 25th May 392, hung in his quarters in Vienna. Arbogast claimed it was a suicide, and it was probably true, but various versions were circulating, and Zosimus, drawing on Appius' contemporary account, reported that Valentinian II was assassinated by Arbogast outside Vienna in front of his soldiers. For his part, Ambrose preferred to pass over the causes of death in his funeral speech for the young emperor. A few months later, however, on 22 August 392, Arbogast opted for open rebellion, proclaiming Flavius Eugenius Emperor of Lugdunum. According to Paulinus, before joining battle against Theodosius I at the Frigidus, Arbogast and Nicomachus Flavianus Senior, the Praetorian prefect, promised that if they returned as victors, they would turn the Basilica of Milan into a stable and enlist the clergy in the army. Many have wondered how to reconcile such contradictory information as Paulinus provides in two closely placed passages of the life of St. Ambrose. Alan Cameron has recently questioned the substance of these threads. The thread about the clergy is sufficiently unrealistic to look more like a joke, and the thread about the stable is a commonplace. Taking the latter first, supposing that it was a commonplace, it only became one after the Frigidus, as the oldest allusion to such a thread is in a letter from Jerome to Heliodorus on the death of Nepotian, dated with certainty to 396. As for enlisting the clergy in the army, this was anything but unrealistic. Toulouse emanated in the space of a few months in 383 in Milan and in Constantinople, and confirmed later by Theodosius I in 386, threatened to enlist the Curial clergy if they had not left their goods to their close relatives or city council before taking their vows. Did not mean members of the Curia, from which the clergy were exempt since Constantine, were a burden both on the time and financial resources of citizens, who were obliged to perform them both on the basis of birth, origo, and personal means possidenti condicio. This means that Arbogast and Nicomachus Flavianus Senior should have been able to allude to the fact that if victory was theirs, they would not grant another amnesty to any clergy who had broken the law previously, as Theodosius I had done in 390, probably, and I'm sure, under pressure from Ambrose. I'm sure from the letter to the sister. Cameron, however, also challenges the author of these threads. Referring to the Battle of the Frigidus, Ambrose recalled faithless and sacrilegious men threatening the churches of the Lord with cruel persecution, without naming these pagans. Paulinus may have been mistaken then in attributing the phrase to Arbogast too, who could not have proclaimed such familiarity with bishop if he had been pagan. Indeed, for Cameron, Arbogast was Christian, and of Christian parentage, being the son of Bauto, who according to Ambrose was Christian. Well, here is not the place to discuss the validity of Cameron's original view that only a small number of Roman aristocrats, such as Quintus Aurelius Symmachus and Nicomachus Flavianus Senior, were still pagans at the end of the 4th century. But quite apart from the fact that the testimonies it cites to prove that Arbogast was a Christian are disputable, Ambrose, for example, did not hesitate to defend Bauto against Maximus, who accused him of seeking the kingdom for himself in the name of Valentinian II, unleashing the barbarians against him. Although in 384 it was Bauto and Rimorius, who was also Frank, who had opposed Ambrose and initially supported a petition of the pagan aristocrats who wanted to restore the altar of victory in the Curia. Thanks to his extraordinary military talent, Bauto replaced the pagan Praetestatus, who had been designated consul for 385, after the latter's sudden death in December 384, and it was Augustine, the official orator in Milan, before his conversion, who delivered the panegyric. We can get some ideas of the influence this Frankish general then enjoyed, as well as his probably wealth, from the fact that his daughter, Aelia Eudoxia, who had moved to Constantinople after her father's death, married the son of Theodosius I, the Emperor Arcadius. Whatever their faith, Ambrose had relations with powerful senators, not less influential barbarian chieftains, with emperors and usurpers, and so the fact that he frequented contact with Arbogast is not proof at all of the latter Christian beliefs. Nevertheless, Arbogast was regarded by some as responsible for the society of the weak Valentinian II, and encouraging the ambition of the usurper Flavius Eugenius against Theodosius I, was the first of those German magistri militum, often called emperor makers, Kaisermacher, who dominated the last 2 centuries of the Roman Empire and helped bring about its end. After the death of Valentinian II and the suicide of Arbogast at the Frigidus, it would not have been expedient to mention that Ambrose had been his friend and had often dined with him, had it not been true. In fact, it was well known, and even Ambrose's admirers, who used many aspects of his style as bishop to fashion one of their own of ascetic sanctity that was, for me, only apparently very different, mentioned Ambrose's sociability in his episcopacy in inviting consuls and prefects to dine. Qui eo tempore consules et prefectos subinde pascere probatur, Sulpicius Severus. Ambrose did not entertain only his colleagues in Italy and the more distant regions of the empire, such as Damascus of Rome and Basil of Caesarea. He welcomed many people who wished to meet him, including those from abroad. Though embellished by taste for the exotic, Paulinus' account gives an effective and reliable picture of the bishop and of the fame he had gained, not only in his city, but also in distant lands. 3. Ambrose and the Marcomanni. Another example is the mention of Rita, queen of the Marcomanni, in the final passage I want to quote from the Vita Ambrosi. The next one, because I wanted to show you where Marcomanni are positioned. So you see, I mean, Ambrose was known everywhere around the empire. Hmm? At the same time, oh, no. Oh, sorry. This is. At the same time, Frigida, a certain queen of the Marcomanni, when she heard of the fame of the man from the report of certain Christian who had by chance come to her from the regions of Italy, believed in Christ, whose servant she recognized him to be, and sent him gifts to the church. She asked through her envoys that she be informed by his own hand what she should believe. And to her he wrote a remarkable letter in the manner of a catechism, in which he urged her also to persuade the husband to keep peace with the Romans. When the woman received the letter, she persuaded her husband to entrust himself and his people to the Romans. When she came to Milan, she grieved very much because she didn't find the old bishop to whom she has hastened, for he had already departed from his life. In Ambrose's letter to Fritigil, he exhorts her to accept Christianity as well as to keep peace with Romans. Being both Romanus and Christianus, he identified Christian faith with loyalty to Rome, so that peoples from beyond the borders were welcome only if they seemed willing to accept the empire and its rules. We have seen that Ambrose never refused to have close diplomatic relations with the new Bavarian generals such as Baldo and Arbogast. They had usually been trained in Rome. They fought for the empire in the highest ranks of valor in the army, and so it was no consequence if they were still pagans. As for Ambrose, their choice of Roman civilization was a providential sign that conversion was certain and imminent. Besides, the celebration of Augustus as an emperor with providence on his side, so that the Christiana tempora coincided with the start of the Roman Empire, was not an innovation by Orosius. His idea rather exemplified faith in the empire's providential mission, which Eusebius may already have expressed when he created the myth of Augustus as the first unwitting Christian emperor. Bishop Ambrose acted in the certainty that Roman universality was an inescapable condition of Christian Catholicism, and for that reason his fame extended, as Paulinus wanted to show, across all the lands of the earth. The references in the Vita Ambrosi clearly show that those foreign people mentioned were willing to accept empire and its Christian Catholic faith. Ambrose's catechistical letter to Fritigil has been lost, like that sent to the boy Pansophius, whom the bishop had resuscitated in Florence. Nor does any other ancient source mention the queen of the Marcomanni and her husband. However, some details in contemporary narratives confirm that around 390, these people, who had created much alarm in the region, could be exhorted by the Bishop of Milan to maintain good relations with Rome, as the Marcomanni had been at peace for 20 years between 379 and 395. The Marcomanni were a tribe of Germanic origin, who were initially stationed between the Elbe and the Oder, and who later emigrated to the land of the Boy, now Bohemia, where their king Maroboduus, who had grown up at the court of Augustus, had managed to create a vast confederation of Germanic tribes loyal to Rome. When the balance of power changed both inside and outside empire, during the period of Mark Aurelius and his son Commodus, they had guided a powerful coalition against Rome, stoking the fires of a war that lasted nearly 20 years. Some of the significant campaign in it are depicted on the column of Mark Aurelius in Piazza Colonna in Rome, and I'm sure you have been there. After the late 2nd century, apart from a fleeting appearance among the peoples that Diocletian and Galerius had succeeded containing between 292 and 295, only during the reign of Valentinian I, at the beginning of Ambrose's episcopacy, did the Marcomanni return on the scene. Around 372-73, they joined the party in sacking and pillage, burning domus and villa, and attacking and devasting harvests throughout the middle and lower Danube, to avenge the killing of Gabinius, king of the Quadi. Ammianus describes the mighty fortification the prefect Probus had built to protect Sirmius, seat of the Praetorian prefecture, and the vigorous action against them by the youthful Lux Maesian future Emperor Theodosius I. He succeeded in signing a lasting peace with both peoples, beginning the long period of alliance, during which it was also possible to begin the work of Christianization, which Paulinus attributes to one zealous Christian, evidently a member of Ambrose's church. Fritigillianus to Milan, immediately after the bishop's death in 397, also corresponds to events in that period. We know that in 396, Stilicho joined battle against the Huns, who were crossing the lower Danube, and also against the Marcomanni, who were pouring across the central Danube, sacking Noricum and Pannonia. Essentially, just as the first literary contact between Fritigil and Ambrose happened in the period of peace following Theodosius' campaign, so the Queen's journey to Milan in late 397 may have been conceived as part of an agreement in which Stilicho had the defeat Huns and Marcomanni to settle in the territory they had devastated in Pannonia and Noricum. There is then historical confirmation of the passages in Vita Ambrosi that implicitly confirms the extensive relations Ambrose was so good in creating beyond empire borders, within those limits in which Christian and Roman universalism coincided. It's all right, can I go on? Second, the making of a Christian community. 1. Ambrose, first aristocratic bishop of the Latin West. The extent of the fame Ambrose enjoyed, as described by Paulinus, reflected above all his experience. But, probably I must go, yes, there is Sirium. Can you see that? I don't know. Let me see which is better. Yeah. I wanted to show all the places where Ambrose went before he became bishop. But I don't know if here Sirium and Milan. I try to find another one. Let me see, because I have some. This Marcomanni, Mediolanum, yes, but we see. Sorry. Okay. Yes, this is better. It's clearer. Then we go down. So, I told you, I think that the extent of the fame Ambrose enjoyed as described by Milanus reflected, above all, his experience. Born in Tyre, brought up in Rome, he had come to Sirmium, near present-day Belgrade, as court advocate of Sextus Claudius Petronius Proclus, then Praetorian Prefect per Illyricum, Italian et African, and an assessor in his council, and later governor of a Roman province that extended from the region, not of Florence, to Lake of Como, Lakes Maggiore and Como. In 374, he was finally acclaimed Bishop in Milan, one of the 4 capitals of the late antique empire, dominating the religious life and the political scene for nearly a quarter of a century. His election was an exceptional event, not so much because an imperial official had been chosen as prelate, but because a man from the senatorial aristocracy in Rome was given that role, the first in the history of the Church and the Empire. Nevertheless, Ambrose was not one of the most ancient and traditional aristocracy. There is a long-standing tradition that he descended on his mother's side from the gens Aurelia, the same as Avianus and Quintus Aurelius Symmachus, one of the richest and most powerful houses of late ancient Rome. Specifically, the family relation between the Symmachite Ambrose has been conjectured on the basis of the expression Symmachus parens. We must find, okay, exactly. Yeah. Symmachus parens, which Ambrose used in his funeral oration on his brother Satyrus, recalling the senator's affectionate insistence not to leave for northern Italy, exposed as he was to the danger of a barbarian invasion. This family tie seemed to be confirmed by the phrase Satyrus frater communis, which Quintus Aurelius Symmachus used in a letter to his brother Cilcinus Titianus, because the term frother could be used for Satyrus. Neither the term parents nor that of frother, however, is a conclusive proof Ambrose was related to the Symmachi and the gens Aurelia. 2 pages of concordances list Symmachus fratres, some of whom, as he admits, were completely unknown to him, although they received or benefited from affectionate letters of introduction. Ambrose's father, whom the bishop never refers in his writing, and whose name and position only Paulinus, almost a century after his death, mentions, was a praetorian prefect in Gaul when Ambrose was born. Even now, his identity is pure hypothesis. In my view, he was not Marcellinus, Comes Rei Private of Constance in 348, as has recently been suggested. I find it more likely that he was the official called Uranius, the same name as that of Ambrose's brother, Uranius Satyrus, who was the recipient, you see, to Uranius, the recipient in 339 of an edict ordering an extraordinary tax levy, You have the translation, the content of the law is nothing, the problem is this name, and the inscription. Only Constantine II, as you see from the second is mentioned in the scripture of the law, but the laws were emanated by the whole imperial college, so that the names of all three emperors should be included. Constantine II was cancelled when all his measures were abolished and his name erased from the inscriptions or being declared publicus inimicus hostis publicus for trying to invade Italy and taking possession of the territory of his brother Constans, for which he was killed in April 340. With this revision of the laws inscription, there is nothing to prevent us from thinking that this law was sent by Constantine II to his prefect in Gaul in 339 to order additional taxation before his expedition against the Sarmatians, who were once again carrying out raids on the border of the Danube. The coincidence with Ambrose's possible date of birth in 338-339 support this identification of this Uranus with the father of the future bishop. His name, using Paulinus information, was therefore Uranus Ambrosius. As he was a Praetorian prefect in 339, barely 15 years after Constantine's reform of the Praetorian prefecture as a regional post, which is now dated to after 324, Uranus Ambrosius was not of noble birth. Important prosopographical studies on Constantine's prefects and their sons show that those we know of were all of noble birth, reaching the rank of senator with the title of clarissimi as a result of having been Praetorian prefects. We also now know that Constantine had reformed the office in favor of men who were well educated, expert in the law, and above all, possessed of that administrative abilities that a long bureaucratical career in offices in different parts of the empire would provide. The education, training and careers of Ambrose and his brother Satyrus confirm the fact that their father wanted his sons to have that kind of upbringing to guarantee their upward social mobility. Indeed, in the space of a few decades, because of the high political and administrative responsibilities involved, the office of Praetorian prefect was the summit of a senatorial career, and those who held the position, and particularly their immediate descendants, were treated with the respect previously reserved for the old nobility, with whom they were quickly assimilated. The new Constantinian nobility, of which Ambrose's father must be regarded as a member, was economically and socially akin in its behavior to the traditional aristocrats. This was particularly so if the latter were already Christian, though there were no special religious restriction. The younger members of the new nobility were quickly adopted culture, ideals and values of the traditional aristocracy. It is therefore certain that Ambrose was the first aristocratic bishop of the Latin West. Second, clergy, bishops, and believers. Palladius of Ratiaria, whom Ambrose had removed from his office at the Council of Aquileia in 381 for his Arianism, accused him in fiercely polemical terms of instructing lectors and ministers of the church after his own fashion. This was indeed the most significant result of Ambrose's activities as bishop from the start. Ambrose's sermons and his particular style of life presented the manners, behavior, and languages of the Roman aristocracy. Both the priests and bishops in northern Italian dioceses, many of which he had himself created in those years. It's because of this that I put again this one, because many of the towns that you see in the northern of Italy became dioceses during Ambrose's bishopric. Oh, for instance, there is not a Vaticinium. Aquileia, Sirmium, there was already, and other, Vercelli had another bishop thanks to Ambrose, and so that. But this is better. Okay. Nordovillian dioceses, yes, many of which he had himself created in those years, and to the prelates had established in border areas that did not fall under his metropolitan jurisdiction. In fact, some of these seats, such as Sirmium, were having advocatus, or Thessalonica, which had been the seat of the Nicene Acolius, risking remaining or falling into the hands of Arian bishops. Traveling frequently and industriously writing letters and publishing sermons and treatises, Ambrose was able to bring together in the Nicene faith an ecclesiastical group of very varied social extraction who in the course of 20 years acquired a marked unity of purpose. This is clear from written works of the time by Zeno of Verona, Chromatius of Aquileia, Vigilius of Trent, Gaudentius of Brescia, and Maximum of Turin, who disseminated the ideas, behavior, and values endorsed by Ambrose in their communities in about 20 years. The bishop's main instructions, which are scattered throughout some letters in his colleagues, are also clearly expressed in the 3 books of the Officiis on duties, in which he reworked the sermons he had given in his first 15 years as a bishop. Through extensive quotation from Scripture, the rules of the Officiis translated the culture and ideals of the late antique aristocracy into Christian terms, following the structure and the schema and Cicero work of the same name. Ambrose, in fact, also shared the taste for the classical of the late 4th century cultured Roman circles, which led to a revaluation and imitation of the genres and styles of late Republican literary artistical culture. The Roman orator of ancient times was also a model for the learned man depicted by Macrobius in his Saturnalia, and the priest was to share their same external manners, from how he held his head to his gait, from containing one's hunger to remaining silent, or speaking at the proper time without raising one's voice. He should attach great importance to the art of speech in his sermons. Sint ergo sermones tui proflui, which should be both nourishing as milk and healing as balm, being designed to persuade God's people and overcome adversaries of the faith by vigor of intellect. Ambrose's priest would also share the ancient sage's modesty and sobriety, patience being an effective missionary weapon in a world still steeped in paganism. Not all Christians are common ones. He should also be generous to the poor and outcast, to the point of extreme acts of charity, so that the people would love him as their untiring defender. Nor did Ambrose wholly abandon the ancient ideas in describing the context and the meaning of Christian charity, misericordia, which was primarily generosity to one's fellow citizens. However, he made the art of giving something different from the liberalitas of the rich Romans, whose energetic activity ensured this political advancement and helped to reduce social imbalances and rioting in the cities. In a chapter, very famous chapter, of the De Officiis, designed to show the degree of misericordia, of duties, misericordia is analyzed as a part of beneficentia for its great impact in the acquisition of the dilectio multitudinis. In the section of the Officiis on the effectiveness of misericordia, however, when he exhorts the reader to help others, even beyond one's means, braving the slander of the hurted, the bishop recalled distributing gold to the poor after selling the sacred plate of the church in Milan to free the prisoners held by the barbarians. From Ambrose, then, misericordia was not just a synonym of human justice, as it was for Cicero, because Christian charity was intended to reach a higher justice. He uses the same audacity with which he speaks of misericordia in the Officiis in describing nature as a common mother in the Nabute Historia. This latter, like the Officiis, was also revised, incorporating over 15 years of sermons, around 389, significantly at the time when Theodosius I was in the West, I suspect, for him. In that work too, interpreting theologically the relation between the natural community of goods and private property, he showed how one might achieve greater justice through charity. Ambrose did not condemn wealth. It might constitute a serious obstacle for the mali divites, and when used rightly, he saw it as the real cause of those natural upheavals, famines, that the urban prefect Quintus Aurelius Symmachus saw as due to the ancient gods being abandoned. However, wealth was an instrument of virtue, adjumenta virtutis, for good people, as one could then carry out one's Christian duties, and through charity solve that crisis of social relations, that the abuses of the powerful, expropriation, the exploitation of the wretched farm laborers had caused. Some priests, in northern Italy, felt strongly the effects of Ambrose's views and responded to the concern of those who felt they would suffer the punishment good reserved to the rich for the rich, reassuring them, as Gaudentius of Brixia reassured Benevolus, a former imperial official and leader of the Honorati citizens and one of the richest men in the city. God made you rich not out of malice, but providence, so that you might find medicine for the ones of your sins in works of mercy. Assiduous in prayer, vigilance and abstinence, Ambrose was also severe in his chastity, recommending it to his priesthood, previously regarded as an elite prerogative of late pagan aristocrat cycles. Asceticism experienced it not as an eremite, but as a pastor of souls, elevated a spirit in prayer and meditation, assimilating the bishop to extraordinary figures of classical antiquity and holy scripture. To Scipio Africanus, cited by Cicero as one who had drawn immediately effective practical energy from the vigor of mind achieved in Otium for contact with the divinity, as well as the biblical Elisha, a thaumaturgic prophet, miracle worker, and counselor of kings, to whom Elia had made a symbolic gift for the sheep included in some particularly significant letters, such as that to Anisius of Thessalonica on the death of Acolius, who was celebrated as the real author of the victory over the Goths after Adrianopolis by virtue of sanctity. And above all, in constructing his own public image, Ambrose managed to form a new type of priest, one possessing extraordinary virtues, which Paulinus translated into a long series of miraculous events, because enjoying divine favor in public manifestation of his authority. I'm a little bit tired. I have only one page more to read. Would you like to make questions, or I try to run and finish my work? Finish my paper? Okay. Very quickly, if I can, because sorry, but I'm tired. 3. The bishop and emperor, believers among believers. So Ambrose addressed emperors in tones that seemed to revive the century-long debate between the imperial regime and the Senate. The priest's authority did not come just from his ability to transpose the power of the great Roman senators into pastoral activity, devotional life, and ecclesiastical policy. Rather, Ambrose's priest was equipped with a divine mission in defense of his church, and by virtue of that mission, he also had the task of confining imperial behavior that seemed unfavorable to Christians to the principle that he had been the first to formulate: the emperor is in the church, not above the church. The facts are well known, and I shall only review them quickly to show how strongly the bishop was tied to his community. So, was not only the aristocratic bishop the actor of the main episodes that we know, but the community. Ambrose was so clever that made his community the main actor of this episode, I think. At the end of the summer of 384, between the corn and the grape harvest, knowing that the synod was trying to have the altar of victory relocated in the Curia of the Senate, and was asking to have the anti-pagan measures taken by Gratian in 382 abrogated. Ambrose declared that if the emperor were to assent to this, it would seem a sacrilege to the bishops on a level with the persecution of a pagan tyrant, and would merit excommunication. Sì, dicevi tibi ad ecclesiam convenire, vieni pure a chiesa, sed illic non invenies sacerdotem, aut inveniam resistentem. Ah, this is, I'm prometted that excommunicated you. Well, it was the Episcopal community, not Ambrose. That's a great. The Episcopal community of the whole peninsula that he was evoked, since Ambrose did not act only for himself and for the prelates of northern Italy, but also for Damasus in Rome, thanks to whom he had been able to prevent the first senatorial legation from being received at court in 382 and by the emperor. Faced with the possibility that the bishop's reaction, isolating Valentinian II, would further strain his government's already weak position, even those members of the consistory who had at first been in favor of residing Gratian measures had been forced to refuse the Roman Senate's requests. The Milanese Christian community took a leading role during the serious crisis for the basilicas. When Ambrose was summoned to court in 385, realized from the letter of convocation that the prince had decided for the Basilica Porziana, San Vittore, he did not go to the palace alone. As soon as the people knew I was going to the palace, they burst in with such force that it was difficult to resist them. The faithful even resisted the charge of the light armored troops of the comes militaris, and only the bishop managed to keep them from open sedition, being assured by the emperor that no one would invade the basilica which belonged to the church. Then, the following year, the whole population, even its most active social members who belonged to the trade guilds, which the emperor had inflicted heavy fines on to dissuade them from rioting, rallied in defense of the city's churches. Besieged there with their bishop, they drew strength from the hymns Ambrose had written for them. Ambrose's adversaries criticized him for the revolutionary tendencies of his popular poetry. It's incredible. What was actually revolutionary in his hymns was that they turned those who could hardly be called disciples, into masters. Facti sunt igitur omnes magistri, quivi expoterant esse discipuli. The spectacular inventio martyrum, which a timely divine inspiration suggested to the bishop, even convinced the Moyan court that the church was the daughter of a Christ who was God, able to work unexpected miracles through the action of his humble bishops. The community of believers meeting for Mass was again the active subject of the confrontation between Ambrose and Theodosius on the events of Callinicum, presenting himself as the prophet Nathan, who spoke to David, guilty of adultery with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah the Hittite. Ambrose had already written to Theodosius from Aquileia when he had heard that the emperor ordered the bishop Callinicum to rebuild the synagogue that had been burned down by the Christians. Remind Theodosius that all his successes, his ascent to the throne, the provisioning of his armies, his military victories, and his dynastic stability came from God. He had entreated him to avoid apostasy by forcing a bishop to rebuild the place where Christ was denied. It was during Sunday service, however, that the bishop, like the prophet Aaron, whose swollen rod blossomed, according to the verse in Jeremiah, and who counsels what is useful to the salvation of the sovereign, ordered the emperor to revoke his measures so that he could bring the ceremony to an end, with the offering of the sacrifice, mentioning the emperor among the offerers. Ambrose dealt in the same way with the serious episode, the massacre of Thessalonica, with whose populace he was tied by friendship for the deceased Acolius and the new prelate Anisius, he had wanted to succeed him. General Butericus had been stoned to death there by the crowd, enraged by the arrest of a well-known circus rider, and this had led to the slaughter of many civilians in Vulcanis. The emperor's counter-order, which Ambrose had requested in a letter, had arrived too late to avoid a massacre. At this point, Ambrose recalled his funeral speech for Theodosius I. The emperor laid down all royal insignia, wept publicly in church for his sin, with tears and groans begged pardon. To the traditional story of Theodosius repulsed at the doors of the church was a dramatized transposition of the dream Ambrose told the emperor he had had during the night. The church and its members remained the fulcrum of the episode. Outside his palace, a believer among believers, the baptized emperor was made aware of how vulnerable he was, particularly if faced by a bishop like Ambrose, with the whole community united in their devotions. Thank you.